I was 8 months pregnant, standing on the front steps of a mansion that was never really mine, holding nothing but a small suitcase and the keys to a car they'd already taken back. Victoria Caldwell, my mother-in-law, looked down at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe and said, calm as ordering coffee, take your charity case bloodline and get off my property before I call security. My husband, Ethan, the man who once swore he'd burn the world down to protect me, just stared at the marble floor. That night I slept in a Walmart parking lot with contractions starting every 15 minutes, praying my water wouldn't break on a second-hand towel. 6 months later I found a dusty folder in a storage unit I could barely afford. Inside was proof that I legally own 41% of the Caldwell luxury hotel empire, currently valued at $2.1 billion. 41% they forgot I still had. 41% that just turned the broke, homeless single mom they threw away into the single largest shareholder of everything they love. This is the story of how I took it all back, one board vote, one headline, and one ice-cold smile at a time. Ready? Let me tell you exactly how it happened. I never belonged on paper, and Victoria Caldwell never let me forget it. I was Avery Thompson, 22 when I met Ethan. No parents, no trust fund, just a full ride to Stanford and a mountain of loans I was still paying off. I grew up in foster homes, learned early that the world doesn't hand you anything unless you're willing to work until your hands bleed. Ethan saw something else in me. He called it fire. He was the golden boy of Caldwell Luxury Hotels, heir to 43 five-star properties across the globe. His father, Henry Caldwell, built the company from one boutique hotel in Napa into a name people whispered like it was royalty. When Ethan brought me home the first time, Victoria took one look at my thrift store coat and smiled the way a cat smiles at a cornered mouse. But Henry shook my hand like I was already family. He said, kid, you've got the kind of hunger this company was founded on. Don't ever lose it. I didn't know it then, but that was the day he quietly slipped a single piece of paper into my future. Ethan and I got married in Napa. Small ceremony, sunrise over the vineyards. I wore a second-hand lace dress I altered myself. Victoria told the society pages I looked sweetly economical. I didn't care. I was in love, and I was good at what I did. I started at the bottom, front desk at the San Francisco flagship, because I refused to let anyone say I hadn't earned my place. Within 3 years I was running operations for the entire West Coast. I turned 3 money-losing properties profitable in 18 months. I flew coach to Dubai at 36 weeks pregnant with ideas. Not our baby yet, just ideas, because a new resort was bleeding cash and I refused to let it fail. Henry watched all of it. Every late night, every red eye, every time I rewrote a failing budget until the numbers finally sang. In 2017, the year before he passed, he called me into his study. He was already sick, voice raspy, but his eyes were sharp. He slid a thick folder across the desk. Inside are shares, 0.5% outright, a gift, and an option, if the company ever hits $1 billion in annual revenue within 5 years of my death. You can exercise the right to purchase another 40.5% at the 2017 valuation. It's my insurance policy, Avery, so this empire never ends up in the hands of people who only inherited a name. I laughed, told him it was too much, told him I'd never need it. He just tapped the folder and said, people who say they'll never need protection are usually the ones who end up needing it most. I signed, kissed his cheek, and forgot about it. Because life was good. Because Ethan kissed me every morning and told me we were building something together. Because I was naive enough to believe love and hard work were enough. They weren't. Henry died 8 months later. Victoria wore black designer mourning-like armor. And slowly, quietly, the knives started coming out. The week I turned 29, I was 36 weeks pregnant with our son. I'd been running on pure adrenaline, closing a resort deal in Singapore, flying back on the red eye, still answering emails from the hospital when they hooked me up to monitors because my blood pressure was through the roof. Ethan kept saying, slow down, babe, you've done enough. Victoria kept saying, pregnancy is not an excuse for laziness. I thought the worst part would be the morning sickness. Turns out the worst part was the family meeting they scheduled for a Saturday. The one they told me was just to discuss the baby's trust fund. I waddled into the dining room in a maternity dress I'd bought off the rack because Victoria had cancelled the designer fitting she'd originally insisted on. Victoria was at the head of the table. Blake, Ethan's younger brother, the one who partied in Ibiza while I fixed his messes, sat smirking with a mimosa. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. Victoria didn't even let me sit down. She slid a folder across the mahogany, exactly like Henry had done years before, except this one felt like ice. Sign, she said, you're being removed as COO effective immediately. Your access cards are deactivated. Security will escort you out after this meeting. I laughed at first, thought it was a sick joke. Then I looked at Ethan. He was staring at the tablecloth like it owed him money. Ethan, my voice cracked, tell me this isn't real. He finally looked up, eyes red, jaw clenched, and said nothing. Victoria smiled the coldest smile I've ever seen. Once the baby is born, you'll be given a generous settlement and a one-way plane ticket to wherever people like you go. Until then, you're no longer needed here. I felt the first real contraction right there in that dining room. Sharp, low, terrifying. Blake actually laughed. Don't forget to leave the company Amex on the table. Avery, charity cases don't get to keep platinum cards. I don't remember walking out. I just remember the front door closing behind me and the sound of Victoria's voice floating after me like poison. Try not to get any pour on the marble, dear. I made it to the driveway before my water broke. I named him Henry, after the only Caldwell who ever treated me like a human being. He came out screaming at 3:17 a.m. in a public hospital that smelled like bleach and broken dreams. No private suite, no flowers, no proud husband cutting the cord. Just a kind nurse named Marisol who wiped my tears with the same towel she used to clean the sweat off my forehead. When they placed him on my chest, all 6 pounds of him, I promised him 2 things out loud. 1. I would never let anyone make him feel small because of where he came from. 2. I would never again let anyone decide what I was worth. I kept the first promise the hard way. The first 6 weeks were a blur of eviction notices, midnight feedings in a 1998 Honda Civic, and crying in Walmart bathrooms while I stocked shelves on the night shift just to keep formula in the fridge. I told myself it was temporary. I was Stanford educated. I had run a billion-dollar division. Someone would hire me. They didn't. Every interview ended the same way, polite smile. Then a phone call a day later. We've decided to go in another direction. I later found out Victoria had made 2 calls of her own to every major hospitality group in the country. Hire Avery Thompson and you'll never do business with Caldwell again. I was blacklisted before Henry's first smile. The lowest moment came on a rainy Tuesday when I was working the register at the Walmart in East Palo Alto. I was scanning canned beans, hair in a messy bun, name tag crooked, trying not to cry because Henry had a fever and I'd spent the last of my cash on baby Tylenol. The next customer stepped up. Victoria Caldwell, in head-to-toe Chanel, holding a single bottle of imported water like she was slumming it for sport. She looked at my name tag, then at me, then at the baby picture I kept taped next to the register, Henry in a second-hand onesie. Grinning toothless. And she laughed, not loud, just soft, satisfied, the way rich people laugh when they finally see you exactly where they always believed you belonged. Well, she said, loud enough for the line to hear. At least now you're doing honest work. Some of us are born for marble floors, Avery, others are born for mopping them. She laid a crisp $100 bill on the conveyor belt for a $3 water and walked out without her change. I finished my shift with shaking hands, went to the parking lot, sat in my car, and screamed until my throat bled. That night, while Henry slept in a laundry basket because I still didn't have a proper crib, I made a third promise, this one to myself. They would see me again. And when they did, I would be the one standing above them. 2 weeks after Victoria's little Walmart parade, I was living in a studio the size of a walk-in closet. Henry asleep in a second-hand crib I'd found on Craigslist. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift and was sitting on the floor sorting through the last box of stuff I'd managed to rescue from the mansion. That's when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Reporters had been sniffing around ever since someone leaked that the former Caldwell COO was now a Walmart cashier. But something made me pick up. Miss Thompson? Avery Thompson? The voice was old, gravelly, familiar in a way I couldn't place. This is Richard Hayes. I was Henry Caldwell's personal attorney for 32 years. I froze. Richard continued, softer now. I've been trying to find you for months. Henry left something for you. Something the family doesn't know exists. I'm outside. I looked through the peephole and there he was, silver hair. Raincoat, holding a leather briefcase like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I opened the door with Henry on my hip, still in his pajamas. Richard's eyes went straight to my son, then to me, and they were wet. He would have been proud of you. He whispered, both of you. He came inside, set the briefcase on my wobbly kitchen table, and opened it. Inside was a single folder, thick, edges yellowed, labeled in Henry's handwriting, for Avery, only if they forget who she is. Richard poured me a glass of water with shaking hands and started talking. Henry knew his wife and younger son would try to erase you the minute he was gone. So he built in a fail-safe. You remember the option agreement he had you sign in 2017? I nodded slowly. The symbolic 0.5% and the weird clause about buying more if the company hit $1 billion in revenue. Well, Richard said, opening the folder, Caldwell Hotels crossed $1 billion in annual revenue in March 2022. Public filings prove it. The 5-year window is still open. And Henry made sure the strike price was locked at the 2017 valuation. He slid a single sheet across the table. I looked at the number. 41%. At today's valuation, $861 million. My knees gave out. I sat hard on the linoleum, clutching Henry so tight he started to fuss. Richard kept talking, calm and steady. All you have to do is exercise the option. The money can come from any lender. Banks will trip over themselves once they see the collateral. And because it was Henry's dying wish, written into an irrevocable trust, Victoria can't block it, not legally. I stared at the paper until the numbers blurred. All those years of missed birthdays, 3 a.m. fire drills, flights while pregnant, Henry had seen it coming. He'd left me the parachute. I looked up at Richard. My voice didn't even sound like mine. How soon can we do this? He smiled for the first time all night. Tomorrow morning, if you're ready to start a war. The day I exercised the option. I didn't call them. I didn't send an email. I just showed up. 9 months after they threw me out, I walked into the Caldwell headquarters in downtown San Francisco wearing a black blazer that actually fit. Henry strapped to my chest in a carrier, and Richard Hayes at my side carrying a single manila envelope. Security tried to stop us at the lobby desk. Richard slid a letter across the marble. Shareholder meeting. Immediate attendance required. SEC Rule 14A-8. The guard went pale and waved us through. The boardroom was already full. Victoria at the head, Ethan to her right, Blake scrolling on his phone like he was waiting for a latte. The other directors, old men in $5,000 suits, were sipping coffee and pretending they hadn't heard the rumors. The doors closed behind me with a soft, expensive click. Victoria looked up first. Her face did this slow-motion journey from confusion to recognition to pure animal panic. Ethan stood so fast his chair rolled back and hit the wall. Avery? His voice cracked like he was 16 again. I didn't answer him. I looked straight at Victoria. Morning, I said, calm as Sunday. I believe you're sitting in my seat. Richard opened the envelope, pulled out the freshly recorded stock certificates, and laid them on the table like a royal flush. 41%. Registered in my name. Irrevocable. The room went dead silent except for Henry making a tiny happy noise against my chest. Victoria tried to speak. Nothing came out at first. Then the venom poured. This is fraud. This is not fraud. Richard cut in, voice like gravel. It's a legally exercised option signed by Henry Caldwell himself and filed with the Secretary of State at 9:03 this morning. You're welcome to waste a few $100 million in legal fees fighting it. The trust was written to survive that. One of the older directors, a man I'd once saved from bankruptcy with a restructuring plan, cleared his throat. Mrs. Caldwell, under the bylaws, 41% makes Ms. Thompson the controlling shareholder, effective immediately. Victoria's eyes flicked to Ethan, begging him to do something. Say something. He just stared at me and our son like we were ghosts. I shifted Henry to my other hip and smiled the smallest, coldest smile I'd ever worn. First order of business, I said, voice soft enough that everyone leaned in. All executive compensation packages are frozen pending review. Second, Blake Caldwell is removed as president of North American operations, effective right now. And third, I finally looked at Victoria. I'll be moving into the corner office on the 42nd floor this afternoon. I believe it has the best view of the bridge. Try not to get any pour on the marble when you pack. Dear. Henry chose that exact moment to let out a giant baby giggle. The sound bounced off the glass walls like gunfire. They didn't waste time. 3 days after I took the corner office, Ethan showed up at my new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom I paid for in cash the day the shares cleared, holding a bottle of the 1996 Screaming Eagle we were supposed to open on our 10th anniversary. He looked like he hadn't slept since the boardroom. Avery, he started, voice raw, $28 million, cash, no strings except a quiet exit. Mom's terrified the stock will tank if this goes public. Just take it, start over. For Henry. I let him stand in the doorway while our son played on the living room rug with a plastic key ring. 28 million would have been a fairy tale ending 6 months ago. Private school for Henry, a house with a yard, never scanning groceries again. I looked Ethan in the eye and asked the only question that mattered. Did you know? He blinked. Know what? That night at the dining table, when your mother handed me the termination papers and told me I was no longer needed after I gave birth, did you already know? His silence was louder than any confession. I stepped back and closed the door in his face. The next morning I walked into a second, smaller meeting they'd called without me. Victoria, Blake, and their fleet of lawyers were waiting with a new offer, this time 45 million, and a stack of NDAs thick enough to choke a horse. Victoria's hands were actually trembling. I sat down, unbuttoned my blazer, and let them talk for 20 minutes straight about preserving family legacy and avoiding a messy public fight. When they finally shut up, I leaned forward. Here's my counter offer, I said, $0. I keep every single share. And starting today, Caldwell Luxury Hotels is going to learn what happens when a company is run by someone who actually earned the seat at the table. Victoria lunged across the table like she was going to slap me. Security, my security now, caught her wrist before she made contact. I didn't even flinch. Touch me, I told her, soft and clear, and I'll have you arrested for assault in front of every camera in this building. Smile pretty. She went the color of spoiled milk. That afternoon I filed a derivative lawsuit on behalf of the company against Victoria and Blake for breach of fiduciary duty. The evidence, emails, recordings, expense reports from Blake's business trips to Mykonos was glorious. Within a week the stock dipped 12%. Major investors started calling me directly. By the end of the month, Victoria's personal net worth had shrunk by almost 300 million. And that was just the warm-up. The annual shareholder meeting was held in the grand ballroom of the Caldwell Palace Hotel. The same one I'd once redesigned from a tired old dowager into the most profitable property in the portfolio. I wore a simple black dress that cost less than Victoria's shoes. Henry, now 14 months old, wore tiny leather loafers and a grin that could melt steel. I walked in 5 minutes late on purpose. The room was packed, hedge fund managers, society columnists, every major financial reporter on the West Coast. Phones were already up the second I crossed the threshold. Victoria was mid-sentence at the podium, voice shaking with forced calm, talking about temporary headwinds and strategic realignment. She stopped dead when she saw me. I took my time, walked down the center aisle like I owned the place, because I did, and slid into the seat they'd left empty at the very front, right under the Caldwell crest. Henry waved at the crowd. Someone in the back actually cooed. Victoria tried to recover. As I was saying, I raised one hand, polite as Sunday brunch. Actually, I said, voice carrying without a microphone, the controlling shareholder would like to speak. A ripple went through the room. Someone whispered, holy shit, she brought the baby. I stood, lifted Henry onto my hip, and stepped up to the podium. Victoria had no choice but to move aside. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. Good morning, I began, smiling like we were all old friends. For those who don't know me yet, I'm Avery Thompson, 41% owner, the one they forgot existed. A low laugh rolled through the room. I spent the next 12 minutes laying it out. Calm, factual, Devastating. How Blake had lost us 2 major contracts in the last quarter alone. How Victoria had quietly moved $43 million of company money into offshore accounts for tax planning. How the Melbourne resort I'd turned around in 2019 was now bleeding $2 million a month under new management. Every slide, every number, every leaked email was already in the press packets waiting under their chairs. By the time I finished, the stock ticker on the wall was down another 9% in real time. Then I got to the best part. Motion on the floor, I said, bouncing Henry lightly. Immediate removal of Victoria Caldwell and Blake Caldwell from the board. Effective today. All in favor? Hands shot up like they were spring-loaded. Even the ones who'd been paid to stay loyal couldn't ignore the math. The vote was unanimous. Victoria looked like someone had punched her in the soul. She tried one last time, voice cracking in front of 300 people and a dozen live cameras. "You can't do this. This is our family legacy." I turned to her, slow, and spoke just loud enough for the microphone to catch every word. "No, Victoria, it's my company now. You just used to babysit it." Henry chose that exact moment to blow a raspberry at her. The room lost it. Actual applause broke out. Victoria walked out with security on either side, head high, but everyone saw the tears. I stayed on that stage for another 20 minutes, answering questions, laying out my new vision, fair wages for staff, sustainability mandates, a complete overhaul of the C-suite. When it was over, a reporter from CNBC asked the question everyone wanted. "Ms. Thompson, people are calling this the most dramatic boardroom coup in American history. How does it feel?" I looked down at my son, who was chewing on the corner of my shareholder badge, then back at the cameras. "It feels like justice," I said, "and it feels like Tuesday." 18 months later, on a quiet Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. I was in leggings and an old Stanford hoodie, making pancakes shaped like dinosaurs for Henry. The security camera showed a woman in oversized sunglasses and a trench coat that cost more than most people's rent. Victoria Caldwell, alone, no driver, no assistant, no armor. I let her stand there for a full minute before I opened the door. She looked 10 years older, the kind of older money can't fix. "Avery," she started, voice small, "may I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. She walked into my living room, sunlight pouring through windows that overlooked the bay. Henry's toys scattered like confetti, and stopped dead when she saw the framed photo on the mantel. Me on the cover of Forbes. Henry on my hip, headline screaming, "The orphan who owned billionaires." Victoria's hands twisted the handle of her Birkin like it was a life raft. "I'm selling the Napa house," she said finally. "The last one. Banks are calling in everything. Blake hasn't been sober in months. Ethan won't take my calls." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a black velvet box. Inside was the Caldwell family bracelet, emeralds and diamonds, worn by every Caldwell bride since 1928. The one she'd waved in my face at my wedding reception and said, "This will never touch charity wrists." She held it out like an offering. "I was wrong," she whispered, "about everything. Please, buy it back. Or take it as collateral. Just help us." I took the bracelet, felt the weight of it, remembered every time she'd used the word charity like a blade. Then I walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out the little silk pouch I'd kept for this exact moment, and dropped the bracelet inside. Victoria's eyes filled with something that might have been hope. I tied the pouch shut and handed it to Henry, who was watching from his high chair with syrup on his cheeks. "Sweetheart," I said, "go throw this in the bay for mommy. Okay?" Henry squealed, grabbed the pouch like it was a toy, and toddled toward the back door where my housekeeper was waiting with a smile. Victoria lunged forward. "Avery, no." Too late. From the deck we watched the tiny silk pouch arc through the air and disappear into the deep blue water with the softest plink. Just like every promise they ever broke. I turned back to Victoria. "You taught me a bracelet doesn't make a person family," I said gently. "Turns out throwing one in the ocean doesn't either." She stood there for a long time, rain starting to fall outside, ruining whatever was left of her perfect hair. When she finally left, she didn't have the bracelet. She didn't have her pride. And she didn't have my forgiveness. Some things, once you throw them away, even the tide won't bring back. 5 years later, on a warm October morning, I stood on the balcony of the Aurelia Palace in Santorini, the newest crown jewel of Aurelia Hospitality Group, watching the caldera turn gold under the sunrise. Henry, now 6, was racing toy boats in the infinity pool with the son of our head chef. My company was officially valued at $10 billion. We had 72 properties in 21 countries. Every single one of them paid every housekeeper, every line cook, every valet a living wage and full health benefits from day one. The Caldwell name? It's a case study now. Business schools teach the Caldwell collapse right alongside Enron. Their last hotel sold at auction 6 months ago. Victoria lives in a 2-bedroom condo in Palm Desert. Blake is in and out of rehab. Ethan, I heard he teaches surfing in Costa Rica. I hope the waves are kind to him. I never remarried, never wanted to. Henry and the empire we built together are enough. People ask me all the time if it was worth it, the sleepless nights, the years of rage, the war one had to wage just to be seen as human. And every time I give them the same answer. They tried to bury me with nothing but the clothes on my back and a baby in my belly. They forgot the one thing every gardener knows. Some seeds only sprout after they've been buried. Your worth is never decided by the people who throw you away. Sometimes the greatest blessing is being forced to build your own table when they refuse you a seat at theirs. Because once you do, you get to decide exactly who's allowed to sit with you. And I decided a long time ago, only the ones who never made me feel small in the first place. Thanks for sitting with me while I told you this story. If it made you feel anything, anger, hope, fire, carry it. And if anyone ever tries to tell you what you're worth, remember Avery Thompson, the girl they threw out pregnant and penniless, who came back and bought the whole damn table. Now go build yours.